The sun hung mercilessly overhead like a burning coin in the vast Texas sky, its heat pressing down on the dusty settlement of Willow Creek with the weight of divine judgment. Sarah Mae Henderson wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her calloused hand, her faded blue dress clinging to her thin frame as she made her way down the rutted main street. In her weathered hands, she clutched a wooden bucket containing the last precious drops of water from the nearly dry well behind the general store, where she worked for barely enough to keep herself fed. At 19, Sarah Mae had already lived through more heartbreak than most women twice her age. 3 years had passed since the love of her life, Thomas Crawford, had ridden out of Willow Creek with his cavalry unit, promising to return as soon as the Indian troubles were settled. 3 years since she'd received that terrible letter with the Army's official seal, informing her that Lieutenant Thomas Crawford was missing in action, presumed dead after a skirmish near the Rio Grande. The townspeople whispered behind her, back, calling her foolish for still believing he might return. They said she should accept Sheriff Morrison's persistent proposals or marry a young banker, Williams, who had been courting her since Christmas. But Sarah Mae's heart remained as steadfast as the North Star, holding on to hope like a drowning woman clutches driftwood as she walked past the saloon. The sound of raucous laughter and clinking glasses reminded her of the world she could never quite belong to. Her family had lost everything when her father died in a mining accident, leaving her mother to raise 3 children alone until consumption took her too. Sarah Mae was the only one left now, her younger brothers having joined a wagon train heading to California. 2 summers back, she was so lost in her memories that she almost missed the figure sprawled behind the abandoned blacksmith shop. At first glance, she thought it was just another drifter sleeping off a bottle of rot-gut whiskey. But something about the way the man lay so still, one arm twisted at an unnatural angle, made her approach with cautious concern. The man was clearly Indian, his long black hair matted with blood, his bronze skin marked with war paint that had been smeared by sweat and dirt. A cavalry saber had sliced through his leather shirt, leaving a wound that seeped crimson onto the dusty ground. His breathing was shallow, labored, and Sarah Mae could see that without help he would surely die before nightfall. Every instinct screamed at her to turn away and run. The townspeople's hatred of Indians ran deeper than any well, fueled by years of raids, kidnappings, and killings on both sides. If anyone saw her helping this warrior, she would be branded a traitor, cast out from the only home she'd ever known. But as she looked down at his face, peaceful in unconsciousness, she saw not an enemy, but simply another human being in desperate need. Without hesitation, Sarah Mae knelt beside the wounded man and carefully lifted his head. His lips were cracked and dry, his skin burning with fever. She tilted her precious bucket and let the cool water flow between his lips, watching as he instinctively swallowed. Drop by precious drop, she gave him her entire supply, knowing that it might mean she would go thirsty until the next water wagon arrived from the river 20 miles away. The warrior's eyes fluttered open, dark as midnight and filled with a mixture of confusion and wariness. When he saw Sarah Mae's face hovering over him, he tried to struggle to his feet, but she placed a gentle hand on his chest. "Easy now," she whispered, her voice soft as a prairie breeze. "You're hurt bad. Don't try to move." He stared at her with those penetrating eyes, clearly trying to understand why this white woman would show him kindness. When her people had been at war with his for generations, Sarah Mae tore strips from her petticoat and began cleaning his wounds with the tenderness she might show a wounded bird. "My name is Sarah Mae," she said as she worked, not knowing if he understood English, but feeling compelled to speak. "Not going to hurt you, just want to help." The warrior watched her every movement, his expression gradually shifting from suspicion to something approaching wonder. When she finished bandaging his wounds with her makeshift cloth strips, she helped him drink the last few drops of water from her bucket. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Sarah Mae knew she had to leave before someone came looking for her. She stood to go, but the warrior caught her hand with surprising gentleness. His eyes met hers, and though he spoke no words, she felt a connection pass between them that transcended language and culture. "I have to go," she whispered, reluctantly pulling her hand free. "But I'll try to come back tomorrow if I can." Dad. Night, Sarah May lay awake in her small room above the general store, thinking about the wounded warrior and wondering if he was still alive. She had no way of knowing that 20 miles away, a massive war party was already riding hard toward Willow Creek. Following the trail of their missing chief, dawn broke gray and ominous. With thick clouds gathering on the horizon like an approaching army, Sarah May rose early and prepared a small bundle of food and medical supplies, planning to check on the wounded man before beginning her work at the store. But as she stepped outside, she froze in absolute terror. Surrounding the entire settlement, as far as the eye could see, were warriors on horseback. Hundreds of them, painted for war, their lances glinting in the pale morning light. Their horses pranced restlessly, sensing the tension that crackled through the air like summer lightning. At their head rode a magnificent figure on a white stallion, his war bonnet flowing behind him like a river of feathers and beads. The townspeople emerged from their homes in various states of undress and panic, white men grabbing for rifles that would be useless against such overwhelming numbers, women clutching their children and whispering prayers. Sheriff Morrison came running from the jail, his badge catching the light as his hand trembled on his gun. "Nobody move," he shouted, though his voice cracked with fear. "Don't give them any excuse to attack." But the warriors weren't moving to attack. They simply sat their horses in perfect formation, waiting. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring until it was broken by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. From behind the blacksmith shop, the wounded warrior Sarah May had helped appeared. Supported by 2 of his people, but very much alive, the sight of him sent murmurs of confusion through the crowd of settlers. Sarah May's heart hammered against her ribs as she realized the full magnitude of what she had done. The man she had saved was clearly someone of great importance to these people, important enough to bring hundreds of warriors to the edge of war. The chief on the white stallion raised his hand, and one of the warriors beside the wounded man called out in accented but clear English, "We seek the one who showed mercy to Running Wolf, son of Chief Many Eagles. Let this person come forward so that we might honor them." The townspeople looked around at each other in bewilderment and growing fear. No one wanted to admit to helping an Indian, especially not with 700 warriors watching their every move. Sheriff Morrison stepped forward hesitantly. "Now see here," he began, his voice stronger than before. "We don't know nothing about helping no Indians. Maybe your man just found some water on his own, or someone gave him water when he had none," the translator interrupted, his tone firm but not threatening. "Someone cleaned his wounds and bound them with white cloth. This was an act of great courage and kindness. We have come to show our respect." Sarah May felt every eye in the crowd searching faces, looking for signs of guilt or knowledge. Her hands shook as she clutched her shawl around her shoulders. Part of her wanted to step forward and claim responsibility, but another part feared what the townspeople would do to her afterward. So even if the Indians meant no harm, it was then that she noticed something that made her blood turn to ice water. In her veins, among the warriors, sitting tall and proud on a paint horse, was a figure that seemed hauntingly familiar. He was dressed in a mixture of cavalry blues and Indian buckskins, his face bronzed by years under the desert sun. But those eyes, those green eyes that had haunted her dreams for 3 long years. Thomas. The name escaped her lips as barely a whisper, but in the deadly silence, it carried like a shout. The rider on the paint horse turned at the sound of his name, and their eyes met across the dusty street. Time seemed to stop as they stared at each other, Sarah May's hand flying to her mouth in shock, and Thomas Crawford's face draining of all color beneath his tan. "Sarah May." His voice carried across the distance between them, filled with a mixture of love, pain, and disbelief. The crowd's attention shifted between them, confusion rippling through the ranks of both settlers and warriors. Sheriff Morrison's face hardened as he realized what he was seeing. "Well, I'll be damned," he snarled. "If it isn't our missing lieutenant gone native and riding with savages." Thomas dismounted slowly, his movements careful and deliberate as he walked toward the crowd of settlers. He wore his army-issued boots still, but everything else about him spoke of a man who had found a new life among a different people. "Hello, Sarah May," he said when he was close enough that she could see the pain etched in the lines around his eyes. I thought I'd never see you again." "They told me you were dead," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "The army sent a letter. They said you were missing, presumed killed." Thomas's jaw tightened. "I should have been dead. Would have been if the Comanche hadn't found me. After that ambush, I was shot, left for dead by my own men, who thought I was finished." His voice carried the weight of old betrayals and hard-won wisdom. "Chief Many Eagle's people nursed me back to health, and in return, I chose to stay with them. I couldn't come back, Sarah May. Not after what I'd learned about what our people, what my own unit had done to innocent villages." The crowd of settlers murmured angrily at his words, but the presence of 700 warriors kept them from doing more than grumble. Sheriff Morrison spat in the dust. "So you turned traitor, Crawford? Chose them over your own kind?" "I chose honor over orders," Thomas replied quietly. "I chose to stop killing women and children in the name of civilization." Chief Many Eagles spoke in his native tongue, and the translator called out again. "The chief asks that the one who helped his son come forward. We have come in peace to offer gratitude, not to make war."
Ow.
Sarah May felt the weight of every gaze upon her. Thomas was staring at her with dawning understanding, piecing together the situation. Slowly, on trembling legs, she stepped forward. "Helped him," she said, her voice barely audible at first, then growing stronger. "I found Running Wolf wounded behind the blacksmith shop yesterday. He was dying, so I gave him water and bandaged his wounds." A collective gasp went up from the townspeople. Mrs. Wilson from the dress shop shouted out, "Sarah May Henderson, how could you? After all they've done to us." But Sarah May kept walking forward until she stood in the middle of the street halfway, between the settlers and the warriors. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst, but she lifted her chin defiantly. "He was hurt and thirsty," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I didn't see an enemy. I saw a human being who needed help." Chief Many Eagles urged his white stallion forward, and Sarah May fought every instinct that told her to run. The chief was an imposing figure, tall and dignified, with silver threading through his black hair and eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. When he spoke, the translator relayed his words. "The chief says that you have shown the kind of mercy that his people value above all other virtues. You gave water to his son when you yourself had little. You risked the anger of your people to help one of his. This is the action of a true warrior's heart." The chief reached into a beaded pouch at his side and withdrew something that glinted. In the morning light was a necklace of silver and turquoise, clearly valuable and obviously sacred to his people. "He offers you this as a token of his eternal gratitude," the translator continued. "And he says that from this day forward you will always be welcome among the Comanche people as family." Sarah May stared up at the chief in amazement. I don't know what to say. I just did what anyone should do. That is exactly why you are worthy of this honor," the translator replied after the chief spoke again. As Sarah May reached up to accept the necklace, Thomas stepped forward. His face was a mixture of pride and anguish as he looked at the woman he had never stopped loving. "Sarah May, I need you to know. Not a day has passed that I haven't thought of you. Not a night that I haven't dreamed of coming home to you. But I can't ask you to forgive me for staying away so long, or for the choice I made to live among the Comanche." Sarah May turned to face him, the sacred necklace heavy in her hands. "Thomas Crawford, you listen to me? I mourned you for 3 years. I cried myself to sleep missing you and wondering if you suffered before you died, finding out you're alive. It's like the sun rising after the longest night of my life. But I'm not the same man who left here," Thomas said, his voice thick. "With emotion, I've learned their ways, adopted their beliefs. I can't go back to being a cavalry officer, killing people who showed me nothing but kindness." "I don't want the cavalry officer," Sarah May replied, stepping closer to him. "I want you. It's the man who chose mercy over orders. It's the man who learned to see all people as human beings worth protecting." The crowd of settlers watched this reunion with a mixture of fascination and disgust. Some of the women were crying openly at the romantic drama unfolding before them, while the men muttered about traders and Indian lovers. Chief Many Eagles spoke again, and the translator's voice carried clearly across the street. The chief says that if the woman wishes to come with us, she will be welcomed as a daughter. He has seen her heart, and it is good. Sarah May looked around at the faces of the townspeople who had never fully accepted her anyway, then back at Thomas and the vast army of warriors who had come to honor her simple act of kindness. "What about my life here?" she asked Thomas. "My job? Well, I don't have much, but it's all I know." Thomas reached out and gently took her hands in his. "Sarah May, I can offer you a life among people who value kindness above wealth, who measure a person's worth by their character rather than their possessions. It won't be easy, and it won't be the life you planned, but I can promise you'll never want for love or respect." Sheriff Morrison pushed through the crowd, his face red with anger. "Now you listen here, Crawford. You can't just ride in here and steal away one of our women to live like a savage." "She's not your woman to keep or lose," Thomas replied calmly, never taking his eyes off Sarah May. "The choice is hers to make." Sarah May felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her like the Texas heat. Behind her lay a life of scraping by, of being an outsider in her own town, of facing a future alone. Ahead lay the unknown, but also the man she loved and a people who had honored her for a simple act of human decency. "Will you have me?" she asked Thomas, her voice barely above a whisper. "Even though I have nothing to offer but myself?" Thomas's eyes filled with tears as he dropped to one knee right there in the dusty street. "Sarah May Henderson, you are everything I've ever wanted. You're the reason I stayed alive when I should have died, the dream that kept me going through the darkest times. If you'll have me, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the love you've shown not just to me, but to all people." "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Thomas Crawford. Yes to all of it." As Thomas stood and swept her into his arms, the warriors began a rhythmic chanting that seemed to make the very ground vibrate with ancient power. Chief Many Eagles raised his lance high in the air, and the entire war party began to move, wheeling their horses in a great circle around the settlement. But instead of the attack everyone had feared, they were performing some kind of ceremonial dance, celebrating the union of two people who had found each other again, against all odds. The sound was both terrifying and beautiful, like thunder rolling across the prairie. "What's happening?" Sarah May asked, clinging to Thomas as the warriors rode around them. "They're blessing our reunion," Thomas explained, his voice filled with wonder. "In their culture, love that survives separation and hardship is considered sacred." As the ceremonial ride continued, the chief called out something, and the translator spoke once more. "Chief Many Eagles says that anyone who wishes to harm the woman or her chosen mate will answer to the entire Comanche nation. She is under our protection now." The townspeople watched in awe as this declaration echoed across the settlement. Whatever they might think of Sarah May's choice, none of them were foolish enough to challenge an entire Indian nation as the morning wore on. Preparations began for departure. Sarah May gathered her few precious possessions, her mother's wedding ring, a daguerreotype of her family, and the worn Bible that had belonged to her grandmother. Everything else she left behind without a second thought. Mrs. Chen from the laundry offered her a clean dress and some traveling supplies, tears in her eyes. "You're a brave girl, Sarah May, braver than any of us." Even some of the men who had criticized her came forward to shake Thomas's hand and wish them well. The frontier had a way of teaching people to respect courage, even when they didn't understand the choices that required it. As the sun reached its zenith, Sarah May climbed onto a gentle mare that had been brought for her. Wearing the sacred necklace that marked her as family to the Comanche people, Thomas rode beside her on his paint horse, and together they joined the great procession leaving Willow Creek. Sarah May turned back once to look at the settlement that had been her home, and faced forward toward her future. The vast prairie stretched ahead of them, endless as the sky above, and she felt a sense of freedom she had never known before. That evening, as they made camp by a clear running stream, Chief Many Eagles approached Sarah May with Running Wolf at his side. The young warrior's wounds were healing well, and his eyes shone with gratitude as he spoke to her in halting English. double quotes, you, save life, he said carefully. Now, you family. Running Wolf's wife, a beautiful woman named Singing Bird, came forward with their infant son. She placed the baby in Sarah May's arms and spoke in rapid Comanche. She says, "The child's life belongs to you now too," Thomas translated. "By saving Running Wolf, you saved his family's future. This is a debt that can never be repaid, only honored." Sarah May looked down at the baby's perfect face and felt her heart expand with a love she had never experienced before. This was what she had been missing in her old life, not just romantic love, but the deep connection that comes from being part of a true family. As the stars emerged in the clear desert sky, Sarah May and Thomas sat by the fire, his arm around her shoulders, planning their future together. They would be married in the Comanche tradition, with Chief Many Eagles himself performing the ceremony. They would build a life that honored both cultures, raising children who understood that love and kindness transcended the boundaries of race and tradition. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah May asked as she watched the flames dance. "Giving up your old life?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he squeezed her closer. "I regret the years we lost. I regret not finding a way to let you know I was alive. But I could never regret the path that led me back to you." Across the camp, the warriors were sharing stories and laughter, their earlier war paint washed away, to reveal men who were fathers, brothers, and sons. These were not the savage enemies she had been taught to fear, but people with the same hopes and dreams as anyone else. "I keep thinking about yesterday," Sarah May mused. "When I gave that water to Running Wolf, I never imagined it would change everything." "The best choices usually start small," Thomas replied. "One act of kindness, one moment of courage, one decision to see another person's humanity. That's how the world changes, not through grand gestures, but through ordinary people doing extraordinary things." As the fire burned low and the camp settled into sleep, Sarah May reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. She had given water to a wounded stranger and gained a family, love, and a future she never could have imagined. The next morning brought their wedding day. Singing Bird and the other women helped Sarah May prepare, braiding feathers and beads into her hair and painting traditional symbols on her hands and face. She wore a dress of white doeskin decorated with intricate beadwork, more beautiful than any gown she could have afforded in her old life. Thomas had been similarly transformed, dressed in the regalia of a Comanche warrior, but wearing his father's pocket watch as a link to his own heritage. When they met at the center of the camp, surrounded by the entire tribe, Sarah May gasped at how handsome he looked. Chief Many Eagles spoke in both languages as he joined their hands with a cord of braided leather and horsehair. The ceremony was simple, but profound, focusing on the commitment to walk together through all the seasons of life, to protect and honor each other, to raise their children with wisdom and love, as they exchanged vows under the endless Texas sky. A golden eagle soared overhead, which the Comanche took as a sign of the Great Spirit's blessing on their union. The celebration that followed lasted 3 days, with feasting, dancing, and storytelling that wove Sarah May into the rich tapestry of her new family's history. Years later, when Sarah May Crawford was an old woman surrounded by children and grandchildren, she would tell them the story of how one small act of kindness changed not just her life, but the course of history for two peoples. She would speak of the moment she chose to see past fear and prejudice to the humanity in a wounded stranger, and how that choice opened doors she never knew existed. The settlement of Willow Creek would grow into a proper town. The story of Sarah May and the Indian warrior would become legend. Some versions would be embellished with dramatic details, others would simplify the complex realities of frontier life. But all would remember the central truth, that love and mercy can bridge any divide when people have the courage to choose them. In the end, Sarah May's legacy was not just the love story she lived with Thomas, but the example she set for future generations. She proved that in a world often divided by fear and hatred, it was possible to choose compassion instead. She showed that true strength lay not in fighting enemies, but in making friends of strangers. And on quiet evenings when the wind whispered across the prairie, Old-timers would swear they could still hear the echo of Comanche chanting, "Blessing." The union of two hearts that found each other again under the vast western sky. Reminding all who listened that love, like the land itself, was eternal and unconquerable.